Hello, everyone. We're happy to have Bryan here with us today. Bryan, thank you so much for joining. How is it going?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing well. I'm actually calling in from Europe. I was just here for a wedding that was beautiful. So happy to be on your show.
Nice. So my first question is, how do you think AI technology is currently being used in our daily lives, and what positive impacts do you see it having?
Well, look, AI is being used in everything that we do. It has been in our daily lives for the past several decades, and most people don't realize this. Every time a user interacts with an app on their phone, on social media, for example, Facebook or Instagram, TikTok, what have you, AI algorithms are determining the optimal content to deliver to that individual based on their user behavior and based on which content the algorithm expects will resonate with that individual and cause them to stay on the platform for longer so that they can scroll and consume advertising in the same light when they consume entertainment, whether it's on Amazon Plus or on Google or Hulu or YouTube or Netflix or what have you. Again, AI algorithms determine which content to surface. Of the millions of movies or millions of short clips on YouTube, the AI algorithms determine which content to deliver. Indeed, when you shop, when you are buying clothing or food online, they surface things of what goes with what you've already purchased based on thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of previous buyers and what they've bought together to figure out what you're likely to purchase. So everything in our lives is currently connected to artificial intelligence in some way. And those are just a couple examples. But now it's just become a lot more clear to a lot of consumers now that some consumer use cases of artificial intelligence, like ChatGPT, like some of these photo and video generative AI platforms that users are able to consume on a daily basis. Now it's become part of the public consciousness.
Can you tell me how you perceive the concept of AI? What comes to mind when you hear the term?
Well, artificial intelligence is just machine intelligence, right? There's a number of different types of artificial intelligence that are programmed differently. So there's machine learning, which is probably the most basic type of artificial intelligence. There's computer vision technology and facial recognition. There's generative artificial intelligence and a number of others. So each of these different types of AI do different tasks and produce different results. A lot of companies now are multimodal AI companies that incorporate a number of different types of AI. So if you think of NLP, natural language processing, that's a type of artificial intelligence that allows you, for example, to turn video into text or text into video to understand what's being said.
And what do you think are the key skills or knowledge that individuals should have to adapt to the increasing presence of AI in society?
Well, being able to use all the AI tools for one. Look, one of the people that I look up to created a new paradigm called adaptive intelligence, AQI. So back in the day, we had this idea of IQ as our intelligence quotient. And then the 80s and 90s, people started talking about EQ, emotional quotient. Now there's something called adaptability quotient, which is probably the biggest determinant of whether a person will be successful in their careers. Technology is moving incredibly rapidly. We've passed the point of inflection of technological growth, which means in every succeeding year, technology will be changing even more rapidly. And so, for example, at Ahura AI, my company, we require every single employee to use AI tools to supplement and augment their work every day. And they're supposed to use these AI tools at least 50% of every day. Indeed, we're going to find, just like in the 90s, when the internet started getting mass utilization, the companies that incorporated the internet into their basic functions were able to thrive and take over those spaces. Companies that were slower to adapt died. Companies like Blockbuster and Nokia and others. And so we're going to see the same thing with artificial intelligence, where if you remember back in the 90s and the early 2000s, there were internet companies. Now, of course, every company is an internet company. If you don't use the internet in your value proposition, you will not last very long. And indeed, over the past decade, there's a lot of companies, including mine, that were artificial intelligence companies. But the reality is that moving forward, every company is an AI company, which means every worker is an AI worker. So companies that don't use AI won't exist any longer. And individuals who don't use AI in their daily work will not be able to compete with their colleagues who are using AI constantly to improve their work. It would be like someone that's an accountant not using Excel and instead doing everything by hand. I mean, it just wouldn't be able to compete with with other people in their space.
How important do you think it is for AI systems to provide explanations or justifications for their decisions or recommendations?
So this isn't as clear-cut of an answer. So as someone that cares very deeply about AI alignment and someone who has led groups and invited quite a few upper tier AI folks to places like Necker Island and Davos and other spaces to have conversations around AI ethics, it is one of the areas that enables us to understand how AI makes its decisions. And so it enables humans to have an audit mechanism to understand why certain AI make the choices that they do and make it transparent. With that being said, there's another argument that says that if you force an AI to try to create an auditable, explainable set of process that is able to teach humans or show humans how it makes the decision, not only will the AI become far less, but that potentially if you take the millions of inputs for every single decision, it just might not be even possible for advanced artificial intelligence to explain things to humans, because we as humans just don't have the compute power. We can't see so many variables interplaying with each other in the way that advanced artificial intelligence is capable of doing.
Do you have any concerns about the use of AI, such as privacy or job displacement? How do you think we can address these concerns?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, what you mentioned is absolutely important, privacy as well as job displacement. And then there's the other component, which is the whole scale existential risk, the whole scale possibility of humans becoming extinct as a result of AI, which is even more robust. So let's take each of them one by one. And I'm very concerned that I've dedicated quite a bit of my time, even though I run an AI company, to also bring people together to have conversations around how do we make sure we don't experience some of these negative externalities or some of these worst case scenarios. So privacy, we saw what happened with Cambridge Analytica, with political organizations using AI-driven content delivery to manipulate populations to vote against their interests, like happened in the United States with Cambridge Analytica, or in worst case, Cambridge Analytica, was used to enable organizations to commit genocide using Facebook, and they paid Facebook quite a bit of money, and so they looked the other way. So there are issues around that. So data privacy is a component of that, right? So if you don't own any of your data, if all of your data is owned by these other institutions, then they can manipulate and abuse that data to then manipulate you and manipulate other people. And so that can be problematic. My personal philosophy is that our data should belong to us as every single human. That just like if we buy a house, we own our house, we own our likeness. So if you're a celebrity, a corporation can't just use your likeness and advertise something without giving you some kind of compensation. That's something that's agreed upon, right? If someone writes a book, other people can't just publish that book and sell it and make money off it. You have to acknowledge it, give permission for it, and then be paid for that. We're now moving in an environment where, for example, companies like Meta have people sign these extremely long terms and conditions that essentially give up all their rights. There's something to be said for the area of common law around unenforceable contracts or contracts that are deemed to be too one-sided and so forth. But as it exists now, many of the social media companies and other companies online own your data instead of you, which means you have no privacy. So that's number one. And of course, TikTok is far worse. TikTok has, to my understanding, and I could be wrong, but my understanding is that with TikTok, you give them access to other parts of your phone if you download that app, where suddenly they get access to your text messages and your emails and your if you have wearables that track your health data, that they get access to that. And of course, we saw that when Meta released Threads, which was the Twitter or X.com competitor, there were reports that you had to sign away all your health data and to give them access to other apps and tools into your phone, which is again highly problematic because those are private things. Your photos, your private photos or correspondence are then given to these external organizations. That's a massive issue that needs to be resolved. Otherwise, we're going to see externalities coming in the next few years. You also mentioned, in addition to privacy, what was the second thing you mentioned?
Job displacement.
Oh, yes, job displacement. That's something I've been talking about since 2018 on stage. I started talking about it at the Unintended Consequences of Technology conference, where I saw back in 2018 that by now a lot of people's jobs would be replaced. And I said that, and I warned people, and nobody really cared. But look, the reality is that by 2030, we expect that many blue-collar jobs will be replaced. Warehouse workers, factory workers, people that work at McDonald's, retail workers, drive-through workers, phone bank operators, customer success reps. Now, those are all just the blue-collar, low-paid labor. What a lot of people didn't realize is how quickly white-collar work would also be replaced. We see in the Hollywood strikes, the writer strikes. The writers are very concerned because now many producers are using artificial intelligence to write books and movies and screenplays much more effectively than writers. We're seeing computer programmers slowly being replaced by artificial intelligence. We're seeing accountants, different types of doctors, different types of lawyers being replaced by artificial intelligence. And so this brings up a very important question. Some people like Klaus at the World Economic Forum call this the fourth industrial revolution because of the impact of technology on labor markets. Others, like Dakai, who's widely considered one of the top artificial intelligence experts in the world, says this isn't the fourth of anything. This is the first of a new type of experience, because historically, it was manual and physical labor that was replaced by automation and technology. Now, for the first time, mental and intellectual labor can also be replaced by automation and technology, specifically with AI. And so that's deeply concerning, because when you replace all these jobs historically, we had 1 to 2 generations to retrain the population for those new sets of skills that was necessary in labor markets. So it wasn't the farmers themselves that were displaced, it was their children or their grandchildren have to learn new skills. It wasn't the factory workers in the second industrial revolution that had to do other work. As their jobs got replaced by machinery, it was their children or their grandchildren that had to take on new roles and responsibilities and learn new skill sets. For the first time, with what we're experiencing in this labor disruption, it's the individuals who either have spent the last 20, 30 years doing a job or went to school for 20 years, got advanced degrees in law and accounting and medicine and other things, and technology that are being displaced. And now, suddenly, in a span of 5 years, they have to learn a host of new skill sets to then take on new emerging jobs. This has the potential to cause a lot of short-term pain and a lot of disruptions, because we've seen in the Great Depression what happens when you have a large chunk of the population be unemployed. It has massive implications for the economy, for crime, for mass suffering and pain. And of course, we see what happens when people can't feed their children or provide a shelter for their families. When people get desperate, it leads to social disruption, crime, war. So that's something we definitely need to approach. Obviously, my company, Her AI, has been working for about half a decade on this problem. We invented technology that enables people to learn 3 to 5 times faster than traditional education, so we can rapidly reskill the population. But there's one other thing I'll add that you did not ask about, which is a much more robust element of the problem that we face with artificial intelligence, where we're at a point where there's going to be one of two outcomes. Either we're going to leverage artificial intelligence to enable the human race to catapult forward in our evolution and create a much better society in a number of ways. The potential is incredible. That's one option. Option two is that we deteriorate and devolve into totalitarian states or extinction. There's a concern there. Look, there was a survey of AI experts recently, and too many of them believe that there's a high probability of extinction from AI. Now, there's a couple ways this could happen, right? So Elon talks about how if AI achieves super intelligence and then looks at humans as essentially a pet or an annoying rodent problem, then even if AI is not malicious or evil, it wouldn't really think twice about eradicating humans if we're being problematic. Just like we as humans don't really have a problem eradicating termites or rat infestations in our cities when they become problematic. It's not a matter of malice towards those creatures, it's just that they cause problems. The second element is the weaponization of artificial intelligence. So we as a society in the United Nations came to a number of agreements around weapon systems being run by artificial intelligence. The expectation is if militaries use AI, that there has to be a human in the loop, right? So for the 3 steps of war, identifying a target, making the determination to execute that target, and then actually executing that target. There has to be a human in the loop that presses the button and says, yes, we need to move forward. Now, that treaty has been broken by almost every world power, where we have weapon systems now that can go through all 3 of those steps in a blink of an eye and kill people. Now, the problem is one of game theory. If you're familiar with Prisoner's Dilemma and a much more advanced game theory, the problem is that if an adversary uses that technology, whether it's in their jets in replacing their fighter pilots, or with automated machine guns, or with missile systems and anti-missile systems, if your adversary uses that technology and you don't, you're going to lose. It's not even going to be close. It's similar to an army with tanks and machine guns fighting an army using horsemen with spears and bows. There's no way that you would be able to defeat an adversary that uses that technology, which means that if you assume that your adversary uses that technology, you as a country have to also begin using that technology. Now, there have been many fictional accounts like Terminator and others that have delved into what happens if AI systems eventually achieve sentience and decide to not follow the directions of humans overseeing these systems. And if they already have control over nuclear arsenals, missile systems, aircraft, naval weapons, tanks, machine guns, and so forth, at what point could they then turn those weapons on their creators? Or could they be hacked in some way? And so All of these things are quite concerning. I think that it's important that we resolve these issues before they get out of hand.
All right, that was really a great answer. Thank you. In your opinion, should there be regulations or guidelines in place to govern the Sorry. In your opinion, should there be regulations or guidelines in place to govern the development and use of AI? Why or why not?
Yeah, absolutely. The answer is a definite yes. So I have joined a number of organizations, including the United Nations had an organization, and then there was a Race to the Top initiative in San Francisco, which was an effort to bring together venture capitalists, Microsoft, tech companies, and so forth. So I joined them to try to solve this problem, and neither of those really took off. And there was a bunch of other organizations as well that tried to solve this problem. I tried to create an organization called Digital Guardians, where I brought together a number of organizations, investors, AI experts, and so forth to have conversations about this and come to a consensus around how do we solve these issues. There's other organizations trying to do the same thing. Look, this needs to be a public and private partnership conversation. If government attempts to regulate artificial intelligence by itself without robust conversations with the private sector, there is a lot of opportunity for over tightening the screws. There's a lot of opportunity for making regulations that are onerous and problematic. As we have seen, sometimes government officials don't have enough expertise in a particular field, although they do have a very important role in creating these regulations. And the other challenge is if they only bring in the very large AI companies, there's an opportunity for regulatory capture, which is what happens when existing monopolistic companies create onerous requirements that limit the power of competition, which we all know creates other issues in capitalism. And so what is the best answer? I don't know what the solution is. However, I suspect that the solution is to bring together people representing a variety of areas. So government definitely has a role, both the United States government, the United Nations, and countries from around the world. So let's be real, if the United States creates regulations and China and Russia do not, all we'd really be doing is tying our hands behind our backs, right? So bringing all the governments and militaries from around the world to make sure that their needs are met, bringing large corporations, publicly traded companies into the picture and the conversation, bring a significant number of younger, smaller, but powerful tech companies that are building AI into the conversation as well, to make sure that any regulations aren't tilted only in favor of large or small companies. And then bringing academics and researchers into the space as well, because they're able to bring a different perspective into this problem set. So bringing these four categories of people together so that we can create a global agreement on what does ethical artificial intelligence actually look like, and then how do we create enforcement mechanisms to make sure that bad actors are prevented from using artificial intelligence in ways that will harm billions of people around the world.
All right, that makes sense. My next question, what are the current limitations you think of AI?
There are a number. I think that we are still in the very early stages of understanding how to code AI, how to train AI models, and also how to expand the use, and also understand what their limitations are. There's a couple things I'm going to touch on. Part is data. So AI can only be as productive as the underlying data on which it's trained, number one. Number two is the compute power. As you increase the complexity of the challenges that AI solves, compute power and energy requirements increase. And third, I'll talk about the distinction between AGI and ANI. So number one, let's talk about data, the underlying data sets. It's absolutely critical that any AI, if we want it to be inclusive of our entire global human family and solve problems effectively, that the underlying data sets not be biased. So we saw problems play out at some major corporations. So Amazon, for example, created an AI tool to scan through all of the resumes and applications it received to determine who should get the first call with the screener to determine if they get a full interview. It turned out, because of all the data they trained it on, the vast majority, I think 99% or 98% of the people that made it through that were white males. Now, to Amazon's credit, they immediately shut that down and said, hey, this isn't working, let's figure something else out. But that's very reflective of some of the challenges with training AI models on incomplete data sets. We saw this at Google as well. So Google's initial facial recognition software became exceptionally effective at recognizing white male faces. It became less good at recognizing those that have melanin and pigmentation in their face, so people like myself, and to a much higher degree, people that are Black. And then even less effective at recognizing females. And so if you were a Black female, there was a high probability of a false positive or a false negative. So what does that actually mean in real life? Well, if the police are using to identify the perpetrator of a crime that was captured on video, and there's a misidentification of that individual as a result of the challenges and inadequacies of the facial recognition software when looking at, let's say, female Blacks, then you have an opportunity for police to accidentally knock down the wrong person's door, guns drawn, shooting dogs, shooting people that are completely innocent and had nothing to do with the crime that was perpetrated. And so there are real life ramifications of this underlying challenge with artificial intelligence of making sure that the underlying data sets are reflective of the entire global population. So the way we solve this at Ahura AI is we make sure that as we train our AI models, we train it on data sets that reflect the entire global family. That way, we don't have an educational AI that works really well for one subset of the population and much less well for others, which would then cause an increase in bias in the world, an increase in inequality and so forth. And so we've been very cognizant of how we do that. Now, this is a problem that a lot of AI companies have to resolve. So that's one of the limitations. The second limitation that I said I would talk about has to do with the way that the amount of compute and energy that's required to complete tasks. We've seen now with generative artificial intelligence, whether it's ChatGPT or Lambda or Bard or any of the others that have come about, they've been trying to train their generative AI on the entire internet to identify how people speak in the way for your audience. If they don't know how generative AI works, they're not creating new things. They're identifying the probability of what that next word should be. And so they train it on large data sets on Reddit and Twitter and everything else online. Well, as our requirements increase and as the complexity of the AI increase, we're going to need larger and larger and larger warehouses filled with AI chips to run the massive number of computations. Now, all of those buildings need to be cooled. Those chips need to be given energy and so forth. And so there's an opportunity as quantum computing comes online. Now, of course, China, Google, and others have claimed quantum supremacy. They claim they've created quantum computers. And as we move forward, we'll see the level of that increase. So that is going to help with solving some of these problems, which once true quantum computing at scale rolls out, we'll see a massive improvement to the quality of artificial intelligence, and we'll be able to break past that barrier or that limitation that we currently have. And then the other piece is energy. As we move from an energy system dependent on non-renewable fossil fuels to more and more efficient photovoltaic cells, solar panels, wind, but then preferably if we're able to create completely safe nuclear or hydrogen power, then we have the opportunity to provide the level of energy that will be required to truly train these massive AI. So that's number two. And that actually brings me to this conversation around AGI versus ANI. So AGI is artificial general intelligence, and ANI is what we're most accustomed to, which is an artificial narrow intelligence. Look, most of the AI that people use are narrow intelligences. They are AIs that determine which content to surface to you or which product you want to buy, or AI that helps you write an email or write a report. These are all ANIs. Even AI that captures your face or unlocks your phone or takes your voice and translates it into written language through natural language processing. Those are all narrow intelligences. They do one specific task well. An artificial general intelligence would be an AI that can learn how to wash your dishes, cook you food, play the violin, read books, write books, fall in love, engage with people, to be able to do the whole gamut of things that humans are capable of doing. That is going to require a significant amount of energy and compute. That's also going to require much more sophisticated ways of training AI models to be able to learn with small amounts of information. So one of the things that limits AI currently is that to create AGI, or really even ANI, you need massive quantities of information to train it to do things. Whereas if you compare it with natural or biological intelligence like humans, we actually don't need that much information to be able to differentiate between a bicycle and a car, or between a cat and a dog, right? For an AI with computer vision, if it looks at cats, to be able to determine whether something's a cat or a lion or a dog or any number of other things, or a piece of furniture that looks like a cat, it has to look through millions, if not billions, of photos to be able to make that determination. And so if you take that idea and take it to that next step, which is AGI, one of the things that has been preventing AGI from fully being created so far is that issue of the sheer amount of data that it needs to be trained on. Now that is coming over the next several years. Some people say we'll have AGI in the next 2 years, some people in the next 10 years. Some skeptics believe it'll take much longer than that, but I believe it'll eventually come, and probably sooner rather than later.
All right, Bryan. I have a last question for you. What do you think AI will be capable of in the next few years?
AI will become even more entrenched in our everyday lives. Look, right now, I would consider most humans already transhuman, unless you're Amish or something like that. Most humans, if they don't have their cell phone, they can't communicate with their loved ones. If they don't have this thing and they don't have their computer close to them, they can't really do their jobs. They can't order food. They can't order transportation on Uber. We are quite limited when we don't have this massive AI in our pocket that enables us to optimize all of the tasks that we do on a regular basis. I think we're going to see a massive explosion of that. I think it's going to go much further, much more rapidly than most people realize. Now, that includes everything from metaverse to AI education to AI work. As we move forward, once the AI headset comes out, the Apple headset comes out for their metaverse, I think the adoption rate is going to increase considerably, which means that we'll be able to engage in a beautifully constructed world that looks very similar to this one. We'll be able to engage with each other in a hyper-realistic way, and AI is an underlying table stake for that. In addition to that, I think most companies will be AI-driven. I think most investments will be AI-driven. And I think it's going to bleed into our social lives as well, where algorithms will determine how to optimize our human relationships and interactions. And then eventually, I believe that each of us will have an AI coach or an AI mentor that will give us feedback. So much like if you're playing a video game, let's say you're playing like Baldur's Gate or a fantasy game, where as you make decisions and change your character or equip different weapons, it tells you the impact that your decisions and your choices make on your character and the end goal. I believe that as we have these AI helpers, they'll be able to do the same thing. So if you're sitting in bed, like it happens to quite a few people at night, where instead of going to sleep, they just sit there doom scrolling on social media. I can see a world where an AI will jump in and say, hey, you've done this a bunch over the past month, and each time you do this, you wind up being on YouTube or Instagram or TikTok for 4 hours. You don't get enough sleep, so your productivity at work is going to diminish by 35% tomorrow. And if you continue doing this, there's a 32% likelihood that you'll lose your job in the next 6 months. Now, when given this data, people will be able to make better decisions, right? Or let's say someone sits down to eat and they're deciding whether to order a salad or a fried food, or whether to order that dessert. The AI would be immediately able to tell them, look, you're going to become pre-diabetic and then diabetic if you eat like this consistently. Here's how you've made decisions and judgments over the past year. Here's the trajectory line and the trend line. And if you continue on this path, it's likely to shorten your life by 23 years, which means you'll die at, let's say 59. And then you'll also have these hosts of medical complications. These are things that are very real, that are in development right now. And with enough data, we'll be able to provide constantly to people. And so I think we're sprinting to that kind of world. Now, on the one hand, I think that massively optimizes our human experience to be able to align our goals and our intentions to our behavior on a regular basis. So that's a really positive thing. On the opposite side, there is a massive potential for abuse and manipulation of that data if that data is owned by different people or corporations, or if it's accessible or hackable by different organizations, to then be able to drive your behavior in ways that potentially aren't optimal for you, but are optimized for the corporate profits of whichever entity, or for a government to make sure that it stays in power. And so we are going into, and we're sprinting blindly into an unknown future that will be driven largely by AI. So it's exciting, but terrifying at the exact same time.
Yes, I agree with you. Thank you, Bryan, for this discussion. Hope you guys also enjoy it. And if you've got further questions or just want to connect with Bryan, you'll find his contact information right in the video description. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.